Thank you for inviting me to speak at an international conference on future of work, workforce, and workplace. I think this is a very, very timely and actually very interesting and important topic, impacting primarily the human resource function or the human capital of the nation. I'm really sorry I cannot be there in person. I had planned to come, but because of health reasons, I'm unable to travel. I've kept my title the same as the title of the conference, namely Future of Work, Future of Workplace, and Workforce. So here are some observations. Work is as much energizing as sleep. Please think about that. Body and the mind needs work, as it needs sleep or rest. Work gives meaning and identity to the individual. Without work, there will not be any identity or even meaning of life. Without passion and self-motivation, however, work actually can become a place for burnout. People who are driven by others rather than energized with their own passion for work ultimately have a burnout. And I've seen many senior executives having that burnout. They simply get frustrated, they have no input of their own, and they finally say enough is enough. Workplace as an institution is equally as important as the family. Family provides a kinship, workplace provides friendship. And you need both kinship and friendship. And in general, all societies, including India, we are shifting from kinship-based relationships, the extended family, the joint family, to more and more friendship-based relationships. Friends matter more than cousins, uncles, aunts, or even your own children. So workplace is a very important institution. Workplace gives identity to the person. Similar to what faith does, or temple, synagogue, mosque, or church gives identity to people. It is an institution from a sociological place as important as religion as an institution, education as an institution, or family as an institution. When people retire, they lose workplace-based identity, including the status, the power, and meaning of life. There is overwhelming evidence, at least in the US, but I'm told it is worldwide. Hardworking executives retire, let's say at age 58 and a half or 60 in India, looking forward to retirement. In America, they say, okay, let me go and stay in a country club and play golf. Most of them die in 18 months to 2 years because they lost the identity and meaning. Therefore, people like us recommend that you coast down your work career and start another career which gives you an identity, but one which has no economic gain. In other words, it's some sort of a volunteer work, whether the volunteer work is done for your faith, it is done for any charity, or it is done for your neighborhood or the community, whatever it is. It gives a meaning and anchor in life. It is therefore important to transition to some social activity, not just money-making activity. Most satisfying and keeps the longevity up for people, active mind, active body, etc. So what's the fundamental shift with respect to future of work, workforce, and workplace? Fundamentally, workplace and the workforce got organized in a hierarchical system. So the hierarchy of management or governance, usually a multiple of 7, Taylor scientific management, where we talked about time and motion efficiency, and the idea was to get more productivity out of the worker while he or she is working in the factory or in the clerical office space. Hierarchical governance, so you are an entry level, then become a supervisor, then become a director, then become VP, whatever it is going to give way surprisingly much sooner than we all thought to more and more what I call empowered governance or distributed governance. And most governance when it comes to human capital in a corporation is compliance driven. What are the rules and regulations? And the role of the HR person is to make sure that the corporation is in compliance with regard to whatever required by the government laws. And of course, there are always loopholes. You bypass the laws quite often, ignore the laws, the typical enterprise and societal issues. However, that is going to change. The HR function will find that they have to go beyond compliance mentality to more and more talent, retention and talent-centric mentality. And I'll explain why. This is very similar to what happens with labor laws. People have labor laws, but they really don't understand the human capital potential for the corporation. Same thing in finance. We would have a compliance primarily to make sure the taxation aspects are done well, filings are done properly, etc., or treasury is managed. But today, chief financial officer is more than a controller and a treasury. Chief human resource officer has to rise same way to that level, as does the chief marketing officer. Goes on and on. All of the direct reports to the CEO and the chairman, those functions are becoming more and more strategic, including CIO function, chief information officer, and my most favorite, chief procurement officer. In fact, most value is done not by us, by our vendors, because even today, 50 to 55% is all supply, what you buy. And procurement is the most corrupt function in every organization that I know of. And how do you centralize it? How do you govern it properly becomes very important. Fortunately, technology will enable us in the future, which is the main point I will make. So, what are the drivers that are shifting the future of work, workforce, and workplace? The first one and very key one is talent retention, or Gen Z. People who were born in 1997 to 2012 as a starting point. Unlike their grandparents who started with one company, stayed with the company for the rest of their life and retired and were happy with a retirement check, very loyal to the company for making them who they are, whether that's a Tata group or a Birla group, the loyalty was even stronger after retirement than before. In America, I did the research on the Bell system where I worked quite a lot. Same thing, all of the telephone people were more loyal after retirement than before. UPS has the same thing in America. But today, the new generation does not even know whether they will stay with you beyond 3 to 4 years. In fact, if you ask them, they say, why would I stay? That bond is just not there from the beginning, which means it is not the individual who will strive very hard to remain loyal and dedicated to the enterprise or the corporation. It is the corporation who will have to figure out how to retain talent beyond 3 to 4 years of initial investment, which is actually investment, no return yet. So talent management and talent retention is a key driver. The old theories of managing by theory X, job security, fear, boss will drive you crazy, boss will be looking down and breathing down and your neck is gone. In the US, that theory was abandoned in the 50s when we had a huge labor shortage after World War II. We created theory X to theory Y, treat the person as a human being, he or she as a family. These are all factory workers. Douglas McGregor, in fact, was the key thinker creating theory Y, and he was able to show in the Western Electric plant that if you treated them with dignity and respect, the productivity of the worker went up, emotional bonding went up. It was a theory Y. Today, that theory is obsolete also. Today, what will matter most is what can me do. My style of management is going away from the boss mentality to a mentor and a coach mentality. So just like what the athletics sports people do, coaching in tennis, for example, or any sports, it is the person, the athlete, who is more in the limelight than the coach. And the coach takes a pride that he or she is my trainee, whether it's gymnastics or even a group sports, team sports like basketball, soccer, whatever it is. People remember the players more so than they remember the coaches. How can leaders change their thinking like that? I think would be a key challenge in terms of future of work, workforce, and workplace. Second one is very obvious. Companies are going through, society is going through in general in terms of digital transformation. Digitization is almost like breathing air. It will be everywhere. You can't live without it. Given that reality, the digital transformation will make significant change in the way work is organized, in the way work is produced, in the way work is shared, and ultimately in the way the work is delivered. Again, I will go into some depth. Third one is public policy. I'm totally convinced that public policy and rules and regulations were created when India began to shift from the typical agricultural landlord society to actually an industrial society, with manufacturing becoming more and more important. All societies have gone through to change. So labor laws were created, quite a lot of safety laws were created. We have the jobs towards labor unions, for example, the British system, whatever they are all obsolete because they were designed for the industrial age, and we are beyond industrial age into, of course, Industry 4.0, or what I call the knowledge age. So we will have to reinvent public policy in a much significant way to be compatible with the new technology and the new future. And the last one is out of nowhere. I never saw the power of this coming till recently, is the social media. Today, as a manager and an executive, you cannot hide behind a gated community. There is no such thing as your personal life independent of your professional life. Have you seen how many CEOs and senior executives are fired on the spot for something that they violated the company policy or had some indiscretion in their life? And it is not limited to the typical show business personalities or star power, etc. It is everywhere. So in a corporation, we are all a fish in a digital fishbowl. So what are the implications for future of work, workforce, and workplace? For future of work, there will be definitely greater automation than ever before, especially at places which are very hazardous for humans to get involved, or dealing with hazardous materials. Or activities are so boring and so repetitious, like the auto mechanics, for example, auto assembly, consumer electronics assembly. Most assemblies are repetitious and boring. Human mind gets more bored and tired, and therefore has a fatigue, is not able to work. Machines will do a better job than humans. Third one is where the machine can be cheaper, faster, and better, which means I can provide better quality through a machine automation than I can do by human doing the work. And many places, that Six Sigma quality assurance at 1 billionth of a particle problem is very important, such as in chemicals, for example, purification. Often machines would be better than the humans. What does that mean? Does it mean that we'll have more job surplus? I don't think so. Humans will move on to higher valued activity and actually command better wages. History shows that. The toughest era was the agricultural area, where the slaves or the bonded labor had no life. You worked 24/7, totally at the mercy of the master. No matter how tired you are, you have a disease, that didn't matter. The plantation economy or the feudal society was the harshest on the human beings. It became better wages, better actually health related issues, safety related in the industrial age, in the factory. Factories improve the wage earning if you calculate per hour. From factory, when you go to the services economy, let's say labor class in the clerical area or the professional area, the wages have gone up. And the society moves from the feudal age, agricultural, to the industrial age, to the services age, and ultimately the knowledge age. Knowledge age is the one where you command the highest compensation on a per hour basis. Whether you are a lawyer, doctor, or whether you are a consultant or a professor, doesn't matter. So the value of the worker will actually go up as we shift from the industrial to what is known as the knowledge age or Industry 4.0. Farm work to factory work and blue collar to white collar has a clear evidence historically that as we automate more and more the highly manual work, the value of the worker goes up, and actually worker is moving on to better and better livelihood. In America, we have undocumented workers, millions of people from Mexico, and they all came to do farm work. Even now they come as guest workers. Very hard work. But today, most of these undocumented workers actually are construction workers. The wages are much more in construction work, undocumented, illegal, but it is better life than being in the agriculture sector. My view is that human resource is the most resilient and moldable resource as compared to agricultural resource like a wheat, rice, etc., or industrial raw materials. If you take a grain of wheat and make it into a loaf of bread, value add is only 3 times, and I can only do so much with the wheat. If you take a rough diamond and polish it, the value add is about 15 to 20 times. But again, you can do so much with the diamond. But if you take a human being, mentor, educate, provide skills, the value add is infinite. That's the power of human capital. And I think we have looked upon human capital as a burden on the society or as a cost center in corporations. We have to change our mindset that it may be the best resource. I can mold it any way I want if I know how to mold it. The problem is not with the resource, problem is the person who knows or does not know how to mold it. So it's a leadership challenge more so than the challenge of the talent. Work-life balance will become more and more critical as the society becomes 2-wage earner families. Earning by your spouse will become more and more necessity even in emerging markets because the cost of living in metro areas is so outrageous. So unless you live in second-tier cities or small towns, almost villages, it is impossible to survive on a single-wage earner for most middle-class to upper-middle-class families. And therefore, work-life balance will be very important, whether it comes voluntarily by the organization or it comes primarily through rules and regulations, as it is in Scandinavia, for example, as it is in New Zealand, and as it is being tried in America through legislation to say maternity leave, why would it be limited to the mother only? Why not the father parental leave for 6 months? This is considered outrageously expensive, but it turns out that it may be very valuable investment. So what's the purpose of business? Purpose of business is not to make money. It's just the outcome. The purpose of business is ultimately to unlock the potential of its own workers. If it knows how to unlock the potential of its own workforce, it'll make more money than anything. In our book, Forms of Endearment with Raj Sisodia, which has led to whole conscious capitalism movement, we were able to document a company called Costco, which pays us highest wages as compared to other mass merchandisers like Walmart, but it is actually more productive because absenteeism low, worker attitudes are very positive, worker productivity is very high, which is also true for a supermarket called Publix, which is basically employee owned. True of UPS, mostly employee owned. It's very much like mutual life insurance where the policy owners own the life, or employee owned enterprises, where you are not a worker but you are the owner at the same time, as in startup businesses. How can large enterprise think like that, where employee feels I own the corporation as opposed to just work there for livelihood? Implications for the future of workforce. We will shift from contract work. In India, I was amazed when somebody told me very reliably that 93% of all the work in India, 93% is contract work because of the unorganized sector and the cash economy. In other words, the typical large corporation where you have an employee on your payroll in India adds up to less than 10%, although it is increasing more and more. And I think we will go from contract work to more and more employment-based work as Indian economy transforms from the unorganized to the organized sector. However, as we become much more automated, as we become much more scale-oriented enterprises or workplaces, workforces, scattered all over the world as many of the IT multinationals have, what we will need would be reskilling the employees. Probably the single most challenge will be because of the technology, digital transformation, our workers are getting obsolete faster than we realized. As it is true of professors, as it is true of lawyers, as it is true of automobile mechanics, for example. Today's engine is a computer. It is not the old mechanical thing that you can tear apart, do the oil change, etc. Today, without a machine or a computer, you cannot even diagnose properly what is the problem with the automobile. So you have to raise the frontline people skill set much higher level than ever before, which will then command more wages by definition. Definitely labor laws in India will have to reform, and they'll become very critical, or if they don't reform, they'll become obsolete by technology. Technology is moving ahead, and therefore labor laws may become unnecessary almost. There may be different ways of governance mechanisms to protect the worker, definitely. Workers' welfare from a safety viewpoint, if nothing else, workers' welfare from productivity or what I call health viewpoints, education viewpoints, that can be all delivered now through technology better than by labor laws. Workforce will demand, surprisingly, higher value added work. Nobody wants to work as they do it today and have a career for the rest of their life. The BPO industry, where I'm quite familiar, is very true. People come into the BPO industry, but they would rather become very quickly into IT services person. IT services people, when you start, they would rather quit in 3-4 years and do their MBA or some other master's degree. Workers like to seek higher and higher climbing opportunities. It is like climbing Mount Everest, more achievement. So work is never stagnant from a worker viewpoint. And therefore, how do you create that higher value opportunities, not just in management and supervision, but in also operations becomes very important. In fact, in one of my books called Clients for Life, which has become a bestseller, I strongly advocated that industrial age, automated factory worker, the master guild thought what he does, 6, 7 years training apprentice will never be, machines can do the work, but it happened. Then we came the word processors in the 70s, and it automated the secretarial work. I used to have people who did shorthand dictation. I had 11 stenopool people who typed all the examinations and the papers. They're all gone. Today, everything is done on desktop. And of course, the highest wage paid is not the factory worker or the clerical, but it is the professional. Most of the work done by lawyers, accountants, professors is mundane, routine. My view is that will be all automated. So expertise for hire will not be as important in the future. And how do you become more a trusted advisor? Where there is no upper price point of how much you can charge, because you add value to your client in a way that experts cannot do it. It requires thought leadership. It requires holistic approach. Clients for Life book has done wonderfully well for investment bankers, wealth managers, has done wonderfully well with the law firms, has done very well with the doctors, although the book was written primarily for management consultants. Then the last area, of course, is implications for the workplace. I think workplace is the most laggard of the three. It is really backward. It is almost pre-industrial age. So workplace will need the greatest change as compared to work or workforce. We will definitely need better hygiene, better safety, and better what I call atmospherics. Atmospherics is in retailing most critical. The three ingredients of successful retail is merchandise, the sales clerk, but the atmosphere, the layout, the music, the decor, the interior, decor or design, very important because they're all intangible, subtle cues given to the body as a shopper customer through sensory things, more than the touch or more than the smell, more than the vision, more than the sound. All five senses come together. Shopping mall people know how to do it well. Stores know how to do it very well. How can our workplace become more like a shopping mall or more like a shop, a retail shop, where the customer is the focal point? Similarly here, the worker is the focal point. Hospitals in Thailand are becoming 7-star hotels because they take a patient perspective, not necessarily the operational aspects or the doctor's perspective. I think it is worth investing in property and casualty insurance. India generally has shied away from insurance policies, but to me, it is a very important investment because the risk factors are rising more and more. Sitting on the boards of large companies, I have been much more conscious about the risk management, especially risk management not only with the customer contracts or with even suppliers to some extent, but the risk management with regard to employee welfare. In the US courts, employees are now getting multi-million-dollar settlements. So companies like DuPont dealing with hazardous materials, the biggest important element is safety first. because one of those casualties or a disability is an enormous cost, and if it goes to a court of law in a class action suit, you pay enormous amount of money. So you need some property casualty insurance or workman compensation insurance. Some of them are required by law in countries like the US. I think all of that will become very important. Risk management. And I also believe there will be greater enforcement. We have the laws in the books, but there needs to be greater enforcement of safety regulations, especially in Indian factories, as is a problem with Bangladesh in the garment industry. So let me conclude. The future of work, workforce, and workplace will look like science fiction compared to the current practice and processes. Work is as energizing as sleep. Work provides meaning to people. Four forces will transform the workforce, and workplace. They are Generation Z, who has no loyalty to the corporation, and the talent retention as a challenge. Digital transformation of businesses and institutions. Changing public policy, as well as the growth of social media. Out of this, the Gen Z and social media will be much more immediate and will impact in a way that we have never imagined. I would worry about those more as they change. So the governance will shift from a traditional boss-driven hierarchical to a more and more empowered, where you trust the frontline person, make them accountable through technology, and empower them to make decisions, so your cost of transaction goes down. You can flatten the organization quite a lot, and therefore management overheads decline in the process. It's a win-win. And workers feel like they own the issue, or they are in charge of the company, or they own the company, at least psychologically. And it will also shift from a compliance-centric HR to more and more talent-centric human resource policy and procedures. Work will get automated whether we like it or not, especially at hazardous places and with hazardous materials, or when the work is so boring and repetitive. At the same time, workers will demand, because that's the human nature, we don't like to stagnate. It is rare to see a human wanting to stagnate. They may have no choice, or they have no opportunities. Workers will demand higher valued, more satisfying, more challenging work and responsibilities, and break the barriers in the process of the gender as well as other inequalities. Workplace will become increasingly important for identity as the society shifts from kinship relationship to more and more friendship relationship. In other words, workplace is replacing the home. Mind-boggling. As is true in Silicon Valley, as it is true on college campuses. The biggest change will be the workplace with respect to hygiene, just bathroom facilities, safety, and atmospherics. The way it is organized, designed, the ergonomics, etc. Landscaping in some fashion, urban landscaping. This will be greater enforcement of regulations related to safety and hygiene going forward. The workplace will blur the boundaries between work and play and between home and office. In my demographic work with dual income wage earners, child in some sort of a nursery nearby, child care center, today the boundaries have to blur where home transactions are done at the workplace and work is done at home. This is the new reality, and therefore it's very exciting. I'm so glad that I was asked to speak at this conference, and again, I'm so sorry I cannot be there in person. Thank you very much.